I call Denise Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take a call for the Greens on this, the third reading of the Gambling Amendment Bill number 3. Sir, unfortunately, we will not be supporting this bill. In the first reading of this bill, when it came to the House, we did support this bill to Select Committee. And we supported it to Select Committee because, without a doubt, there are some good things within the bill itself. However, since then, there have been no movement from the government to try and reduce some of the issues or mitigate some of the issues that we raised and that submitters raised as well during the Select Committee process around how this bill and the provisions in it could actually contribute to problem gambling and problem gambling incidences. So for that reason, it's impossible for the Greens to support this bill in its final reading. So we had compelling evidence and compelling submissions from people with the Government Administration Select Committee who were talking about the potential for some of the changes in this bill to create more gambling harm than there currently is. And despite that evidence, and despite arguing during the deliberations in Select Committee for changes to the bill, and despite me putting up supplementary order papers that would remove that particular provision in the bill, despite all that, sir, we come to the House for the third reading, and it is a bill that we can't support. Now, we agree with many of the parts of this bill that others have already spoken about. For example, we agree with the aims to increase transparency around grant making. That's great. We agree that about reducing potential conflicts of interest. We also think that's reasonable. We also agree with improving transparency surrounding management companies that provide societies with services for things like grant making, grant applications. We agree with that. We agree that we should be ensuring that there are efficiencies around the appeal process and that it's not undermined. These are all parts of the aims of this bill, and we agree with all that. And we even agree, to some extent, with the aim that was stipulated in this bill of simplifying compliance and reducing costs for societies and venue operators in some areas. But this, sir, is where the deal breaker is. Previous speakers, I think, have, and I've referred in my previous speeches, have referred to the fact that this bill amends the Gambling Act of 2003. And if we look at what that principal act is designed to do, and I've spoken about this before, its intentions, its aims include preventing and minimising harm from gambling, including problem gambling, and also facilitating responsible gambling. But we believe that with this bill, with the removal of the prohibition of commission payments to be paid to venue operators, that cuts right across the aims of the original and principal 2003 Act. So what we've had in the Act since 2003, for all this time, actually, has been that the compensation for venue operators should be based on actual and reasonable costs. And that's fair enough. And my understanding is the reason for this is that Class 4 gambling in pubs should not be the sole reason for pubs to be open. They are a venue in themselves. They are an entertainment in themselves. And so the costs that are associated with hosting gambling machines on their premises should be reasonably minimal. And I agree, it is fairly complicated, the whole situation, on how you assess what is actual and reasonable costs. However, the Department of Internal Affairs, Department of Internal Affairs and the Gambling Compliance team have been working for years with the industry, with venue operators and with gambling societies themselves to attempt to try and simplify and educate the venue operators on what is, on ensuring that they are getting paid the right amount for actual and reasonable costs. Now, Sarah, if we remove the prohibition on commission-based payments for venue operators, we're changing the focus to potentially a position where it could change the focus for venue operators so that they are more profit-driven around the money that is lost on gambling machines on their premises. It would be an incentive, Sarah, and I think others have talked about this. There would be an incentive for venue operators to not intervene, to not undertake their host responsibility for gamblers who may be experiencing limited control over their gambling at those machines. It makes sense, I guess, if there is an incentive for the venue operator because they are going to get more money as a result of the profits from the machine, then they will want people to keep gambling regardless of the state they are in. And that cuts right across the Gambling Act of 2003 and the requirements in there for venue operators to be really good hosts and to be able to identify problem gamblers on their site and to intervene and do something about it. Now, so we already know that many venue operators have got a very poor record around their host responsibility. We know this, and it was talked about a lot during the select committee process. We know this because a year ago, the Department of Internal Affairs Gambling Compliance team undertook a mystery shopper experiment where they visited 102 venues and tested the host responsibility programs at each of these venues. And essentially what they did was they had some person play the machines in these venues, and that person would start to exhibit the classic symptoms, the classic traits of a person who is experiencing problems with their gambling. And that was things like the person would say, I really should go home, but I need to win some money back. Or that person would bang the machine in frustration. So there were 102 venues tested, which is a decent enough sample. And actually, only one venue passed the test of host responsibility. So there are other provisions in this bill which actually says that we should be rewarding good behaviour by extending licences for venue operators and societies as well, sir. But actually, the evidence that we've seen is that the behaviour hasn't been terribly good so far. And why, and I've never got an answer to this, but why would you relax the rules when you haven't seen the good behaviour so far? Surely we should be regulating so that people lift their standard of behaviour to where we want it to be before we offer rewards, sir. So this is a lost opportunity, and we're deeply regretful about this, that this is a lost opportunity for this government to have actually put in place some mechanisms in the legislation that would deal to the harmful products that gambling machines are. And we've heard previous speakers say that it's actually only 0.0% of 1% of the population who have problems with their gambling. And that is actually true of the general population. But the percentage is much, much higher if those people are regular gamblers. Sir, we've lost an opportunity to put in some decent legislation to prevent problem gambling harm. We could have introduced pre-commit cards and player tracking. We haven't done that. And what we're doing is we are going to be ensuring that more gamblers are harmed.